Welcome back, everybody, to another segment of Franchisors.com. Thank you all for joining us once again. So today we are on day number 16 out of 47. So we do have quite a lot of work left to do here. So we are spending some time here in South Florida, and I had a chance to take a ride down 95 in the Sawgrass Expressway over to Tamarack, Florida, to visit with a very good friend of mine and somebody who I just had the pleasure of meeting. Really happy that we can hang out together, gentlemen. I have Bud Summers, the EVP of Operations from PuroClean, and also my good friend, Tim Courtney, the Vice President of Franchise Development. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I was saying before we got on the camera, folks, that Tim and I are friends in franchising and have been since for a good amount of time now, and for as long as I could legally drink, we've basically been drinking together the entire time.
That's
it's very
true.
Strange to not have anything with us at the moment.
I know, but we can find something.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
We can probably figure it out, but but let's get down to brass tacks while we can, gentlemen. I'm looking forward to it. You guys definitely have a really unique, I guess, perspective, because you have both the operations and development. I think that there's a lot of stuff in franchising that kind of relates between the two, but not often do people put those folks in the same room. And I think that this will be a really awesome way to kind of have some folks that are on the emerging side to learn a little bit from the both of you, because your disciplines can often be viewed as being very different. So I guess to start, when you guys first got here, when you guys first started up your departments and took charge of both of them respectively, what was the first thing that you guys did in terms of trying to build out your team properly? Because I'm sure that, with operations and development, you guys have had other stops, you being a franchisee and you, of course, being at other franchisors in the area. What were some of the functions that you really felt were important to ensure that your teams function properly?
Well, I think to answer that, it's the chicken or the egg, right? So I don't know if I let operations go first or...
You start. I'll follow.
Oh, okay. So again, this chicken or the egg, I don't know which came first. So actually, I joined PuroClean here about 2 years ago, and Bud was already here and had already gotten his stuff going, which is really was exciting for me, because I got to sell the opportunity, what he was building in the background from operations. But I think when, you always look at, kind of need from a standpoint of, how mature the brand is too. I mean, PuroClean's a mature brand. It's been around over 20 years. And basically it's under new ownership, and I like to call it re-emerging, right? So we're a re-emerging brand, and things are really, when that happens, you start to reinvest in the business, and that was going on. So franchise development was a major reinvestment that was happening at the time of new ownership. So basically it's just looking at, who are the folks currently on the team, what are the sales processes in place, and then basically starting to look at there. So I know immediate need that we needed was someone who can run, franchise development marketing for this team. I mean, there was, kind of a Wild West scenario of where marketing was being done. There were some ad agencies involved. There were numerous people involved, and it was kind of reining that in for budget purposes and really trying to get the best ROI out of it. And so that was one of my first hires, was hiring someone who was dedicated to managing, the recruitment marketing side of it, which of course is separate from consumer marketing, because you really need that someone who's focused on finding franchisees and where to hunt for those franchisees. Other than that is always certainly looking at the sales team that you have in place and making sure that we had the best plans moving forward for those folks. And we added to that because we knew what, with this investment in franchise development, we wanted to increase our goals, knowing what close ratios and budgets and everything that were available. We knew we at least needed another 2 franchise development folks. So we grew the team to 5, added a marketing person, and we also have an administrative person who helps with trade show logistics and lead distribution. And we're always looking to fine tune it. We certainly will probably make some more tweaks as we go on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bud, how about you?
Well, as Tim said, I got here a little bit before him, about 2 years before. The biggest transition that I made as soon as I got here was increasing the amount of support that the franchises had. When I got here, the ratio was 1 regional director or support person for every 45. Immediately went to ownership, and as Tim said, ownership was willing to reinvest into systems and people. So we instantly hired 2 additional regional directors. We got that number down to 35. Now that number is consistently around the mid-20s. it's really difficult for Tim to be able to sell franchises without having a solid core of competency of support, because they want validation from existing owners. We had to earn that right back again, because quite frankly, before I arrived and before the new ownership, the franchises were really underserved. So we changed that, and we started setting goals for the regional directors to demonstrate that we were adding value to the existing franchises. The growth that we've experienced over the last 4 years in overall volume has been from growing our existing units and increasing their profitability. And that created an environment for Tim and I to be able to work together really in almost a seamless fashion, because he knows that when a new prospect is calling around to existing owners in the area, the majority of the time they're going to get a positive review, and that wasn't happening 4 years ago.
Very good, and a lot of really good nuggets in there that we'll definitely dive into a little bit later in future questions. One thing that I know that is important to you guys, and one thing you guys mentioned off camera to me before we got on, was about how operations and sales play a role in each other's departments. And I think that one place that's really important is at the very beginning, when Tim first came on board. The first couple franchisees that Tim brought on probably had a bit of a different flavor than the ones that were here before. And so I guess my question is how has that selection process evolved since you guys have started to work together? And what are some things that you guys have learned from that first wave? I'm sure that it's a lot. So any questions?
I think you hear a lot of franchisors throw the word, we award franchises, we don't sell them. I think we've finally gotten to that point of awarding franchises instead of just selling them. I think, PuroClean has had a very, a past of just, the old saying is, if you can fog a mirror and sign a dotted line.
We've been hearing that a lot.
Yeah, you get the franchise. So I think it was great when I first started. Bud comes in and says, basically, how can I help you? What do you need? Basically, guy even came in and cleaned my whiteboard because it hasn't been cleaned in a while. So that was right away. So leaning on Bud and leaning on how we could attract better franchisees and how can we kind of work with them and certainly improve our executive review processes and things of that nature. I think it's really working with making, what the operation, finding folks that makes the operations team easier, because you certainly don't want to put, potential franchisees out there that are just not going to conform to the way, him and his team do things. So is that a good recollection of?
Yeah, I think the other part of it, we began to, almost from the very beginning, to get the people on his team and the people on my team to communicate on a regular basis. So as soon as a candidate started to express interest in a particular area, we were getting information from the regional director of that area and getting a read of what was going on with the existing franchises. Also, over the last year and a half, we've really worked on seeing what owners that we had that were either looking to exit from the system for one reason or another, and then trying to match up existing franchises. And there have been several times where somebody has come in and we've said, well, there's an existing franchise here or that. It comes down to communication and the ability for us to be able to do what's best for the system, but also best for both teams.
Sure.
It's not a situation where I need to win or Tim needs to win. We both need to win, and that's what we work on. And then if we can't find that with a particular candidate, then at that point, we're just not the right system for them. But the decision is made because it's really apparent to his team and my team that this isn't the right fit. I think, and Tim has a much longer history in this side of franchising than I do. Sure. As you mentioned, I owned a couple franchises, and so my view of franchising was substantially different until I came in and started working on this side of the lane. But But to find the ability for it to be a win-win, and we're both agreeing this is the right candidate for this place, makes it so much easier. It just takes an enormous amount of the stress out of the whole process.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that that's one thing that people should take away. That's the reason why you guys are both sitting here together, is that that's something that should be a theme that people kind of begin to see around all of franchising. And you guys are obviously lucky that you guys have noticed that this is important earlier than a lot of people, but hopefully we see it as commonplace, and that's kind of the goal and why we did this. So happy that we could do it. So Tim, question for you actually specifically, and that's kind of about the differentiation that you guys have from a franchise development standpoint versus that of your competitors within this particular industry in franchising. And I think that the reason I'm asking this is to kind of have an idea for people when they are trying to figure out how to differentiate themselves from a franchise development standpoint, if there were any tools or strategies that you have thought of or used in your career that may be able to help them along the way, even though it may not be the same industry per se.
Well, I think one of the best things that I've learned is you have to study your competitors. If you're not reading your competitors' FDDs, then you're doing yourself a disservice. But other than that, I think we didn't do a deep dive mystery shop of our competitors, but we've certainly done enough research and talked to enough of our own candidates that have potentially looked at our competitors. I think what makes PuroClean stand out is certainly the culture here. It starts with our president, Steve White, who has a decades-long career in franchising way back from Domino's Pizza, and that was kind of that. This kind of our servant leadership, and I think it's right there out on our wall in the lobby. Is we're a servant leader. We are franchisee is not is our friend, and I think that's what our candidates see. Except especially they get a professional development process with my sales team. They get here to meet the team day, and they see the difference, especially if they've looked at any other industries as well. It doesn't have to be our direct competitors. They see culture, and even if a competitor goes in a different direction, it's hard for them to tell us no, because we've over-delivered on that expectation of who we are and who our culture is. And I think that's the sad part too, is knowing, even though this might not have been the industry fit, that our culture was enough to make it such a tough decision. I think that's what we have going, and that's what we try and showcase now in everything that we do from a development side. And I think it's to continue learning who we are, how to capitalize on those strengths, and continue to study who our competitors are, and making sure that we're doing things a little differently.
Absolutely, and thank you for going through that. I think that culture is such a large part of what makes a lot of brands really different. I don't think you guys are an exception, and there are some things that we'll go into with that a little bit later. So thanks for sharing that. And Bud, I think that for you specifically, I think it'd be good if you could speak to how you guys differentiate yourselves from a product or service standpoint. I guess on the consumer side, I think that operations plays a really large role in how you guys do so. And I had the pleasure of going into one of the many things that makes you guys different. So would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Well, you did get a chance to see our drying house because we deal with water damage, fire damage, mold, biohazard. We have a house built within our warehouse here, and it meets Florida codes. It has hurricane windows. It has everything you could want or require by state law in a building. The only difference is we regularly flood it to the tune of about 16,000 gallons every time, and we went 100 floods in that house, dried it down professionally, and didn't have to replace any sheetrock, didn't have to replace subfloor. It's what we call the science of drying, and it's what a lot of our industry talks about. But we really, our new candidates spend a week in there, and much of our training is wrapped around that. The other piece is what Tim was saying, is the focus we make on culture. The first day and a half of training that they're here is really about culture. How the culture of our franchisor, the culture of the individual franchise, what their mission statement is going to look like. And so it drives that as well. And I don't know that our competitors come come close to doing that kind of
Sure. I mean, and I think that we can all agree that this is an industry that, whenever you can actually bring it to life a little bit and make it more exciting, it's really important to do so. And I think in addition to that, the fact that you guys are allowing your franchisees to really do something trial by fire and really get into the trenches and do it before they actually are being paid to do it, I think is really important. I think that definitely sets you guys apart, because it's one thing if they mess up here, but it's another thing if they mess up while they're in the field. So it's definitely a lot better for them to do it here. So awesome. We mentioned something earlier that I wanted to go back to, and that's about, I think it was you, Bud, that mentioned it was unit economics. And I think it would be just helpful for the folks on here to understand how you guys measure it and how you guys kind of take a look at that data and make actionable business decisions and things of that nature.
Well, again, when I arrived here, we didn't have a unified chart of accounts throughout the system.
Wow.
It had delineated into a bunch of individual owners saying, well, I want to look at this and I want to look at that. We also had a lot of our franchises, quite frankly, that were managing their businesses out of checkbooks. And when there was money there, they had money, and when there wasn't. And some of that is due on part to some of the profit margins that we have in our business that can allow some of that. But we setting a unified system so everybody was on we were reading the same data, and then to be able to collect that data and then project that throughout the entire system and look at different sizes of operations and saying, if you're at this size, your labor rate should be this and this and this and this. It gave them the ability to really, many of them for the first time, to honestly evaluate their business based on profit margin instead of gross volume.
Yeah, absolutely.
And once they saw that, once we were able to flip that switch for them, and that was even in how we did awards at the end of the year. When I first got here, it was just based on total volume. Well, we found that there were people that won Franchise of the Year, and 2 years later they were out of business.
Wow.
Because they were so heavily leveraged and weren't managing their business effectively. And so making changes so that we were honoring the people that were not only generating a high amount of volume, but also a good profit margin. And it took us a couple years to begin to get that education to go through, but now it's really changed and become kind of a mantra for us. And as we did that created some incredible growth for us as a system without letting that growth just be dependent on the number of units that we bring in.
Yeah, and I think that one of the advantages of having that data at your fingertips is that you actually get to use it actionably, and you guys have started to really do that. And I think that, Tim, question that I have for you is kind of transitioning more into the franchise sales side, is how you actually use that data in the FDD and how you use the FDD as a sales tool. Because I think that that's one thing that a lot of folks, they're scared of the FDD because it's legal, and so a lot of people don't really like to mess around with that. But I know that you, being a seasoned franchise development professional, you certainly do know how to use it the right way. So is there any tips that you have for folks who may be wondering how to?
Yeah, I think what's great is, especially for other potentially emerging brands, let's say I'm in the franchise disclosure document, or FDD, it's your last marketing tool. I mean, it certainly is a legal document, but there is certainly things that you can do in there to certainly sell your brand. And one of those is the item 19, which is the financial performance representations, where franchisors like PuroClean get to kind of showcase franchisee earnings, earnings of the system collectively, and there is a unlimited way of slicing and dicing of your financial data. As long as it is legitimate, you can put it in there. And I think what we've done certainly is shown some great item 19 in there, from gross sales and 1 to 3 years, and we break it out in segments, and we do it in thirds. So we do slice all the sales data. But I think what's most important, one of the biggest changes that we did, and it goes back to what Ops has been working on, is we rolled out a complete benchmarking survey, where we took in over 100 of our franchisees' P&Ls, and we were able to drill down into gross profit percentages, as well as even net owner discretionary income percentages, and to really now show not only the top line sales number, the gross system-wide sales number or by year or whatever, but then also see that broken down into what the true profit margin is on that number. I believe, somebody like us in our space, very few have those profit margin numbers in their item 19. So I think the item 19 is there for you to showcase to a franchise candidate, how much money can I make? And if you want people to see the truth, then put it in there. I always tell people to question if a company doesn't have an item 19, they should always ask why. Why aren't they showing the numbers? Because that's where, if the system's making money, it's going to be listed.
You should be bragging about it.
You should be bragging about it, exactly.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that, it's also important to know that, you don't want to be showing the cold hard truth to people that, you don't feel are worthy of it. And I think that one of the questions that often people are wondering is there a silver bullet when it comes to where the leads come from and everything like that? I know that has evolved in the many in the stops that you've had in the past around here. Is there any recommendations that you have for where people should be finding leads? If it's one place, if it's a lot of places?
For franchise prospects?
For franchise prospects.
Oh, wow.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I'm almost 10 plus years now in franchise development, and you're right. It's varied throughout the years. I think people's they change throughout time, right? They become more educated. I think the way we found franchise prospects 10 years ago is certainly different than the way we're finding them today.
Sure.
There is a plethora of tools out there. No, there is no silver bullet, and I think it varies by brand. I think certainly you should have a good mix. I think you should always focus a lot on your internal marketing with your own franchise development website, your own search engine advertising, whether it be pay-per-click or even search engine optimization tricks to help get listed earlier on search pages also help. But you still need to mix it up. I've always kept a small portion in print. Especially with Entrepreneur Magazine. I have used a couple of franchise portals. Some I've done, on and off. And I still participate in a lot of trade shows. I still think trade shows work to this day. I still think, yes, they are a large investment at times, but I think it's a good way to get out and meet people in the cities that you need to. Not only the large franchise shows, but there are smaller franchise expos that help. Pick cities that you need. Go meet people. Make sure you're following up. I think that's the trick there with those is people go to franchise shows and they forget to follow up with those leads. So I've always kept the big mix, and I think the bottom line is you need to study your metrics. I think the average close ratio in franchising today is certainly 2%. You need to then manage your lead resources, cost per leads. I mean, we can get into a whole metrics conversation here.
Sure, we can.
And take up the whole hour, but know what your metrics are, manage against those metrics, and find the lead sources that fit the budget and cost per acquisitions that you need. And I think you'll be on the right track.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. So, guys, I wanted to transition, a little bit to something that I know you guys definitely play a large role in when it together, and that's the franchisee-franchisor relationship. And I think that it would be really helpful for people to kind of understand some tips and tricks that you guys may have, rather that's interdepartment tricks that you guys have to make this thing go in the way that it does, and if there's anything that you guys could. If there are any programs that you guys have instituted that have really helped make it a more well-oiled machine. And that's to either of you. Whoever wants to.
I think we have just entered into a complete new software for our franchises. We've used one particular software for 8 years. We got our franchises to enter into a conversation with the Leadership Council, which is the franchises that were elected by their fellow franchisees. I think incorporating what we call our NLC, our Leadership Council, incorporating them into changes and decisions gives you street cred before you start talking about a change, especially if you look at them and you say, don't tell anyone about this. But we're thinking about, and then you just sit back, you let them try it, giving them the opportunity to kick the tires on it and to demo it, and then they become advocates for the change that you're trying to do. That's been a really key component for us. And really quickly, this was again something Steve White brought when he came here. Before Steve, the Leadership Council was really just a rubber stamp for whatever ownership really wanted to do. When he got here, we started having open discussions and saying, we're thinking about A, B, or C. What do you think? And collecting the data. And as Steve said, the great part about that is you'll get buy-in. The bad part about it is they may not pick what you want. So you really have to make sure that you're being open and honest with them. I think that from an ops standpoint made my job of rolling things out so much easier. Sure. Because the people that the fellow franchises respected the most were in favor of what we were doing. And that helped. There's always going to be naysayers, no matter what you do. But that really helped diffuse a lot of that for us.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think from the development side, we begin with the end in mind. I think we're constantly looking at folks who kind of fit that mold of what we're trying to do. I mean, we've certainly, have had people leave Meet the Team Day, whether we ask them to or not. But I think, in that's what I'm saying. I mean, the culture part of this is really important, and knowing what they are doing, and you're not going to find 100% complete personality match that's ever going to fit, but someone who already understands the inner workings of the organization through our network leadership council or through the way we do things here. I think it's just you're always building that in your development process, so they're familiar with it. It's not a shock to them when they sign and get here into training. They already know. So if you're giving them a taste of who you really are during the development process, it's not culture shock once they walk in the door through training. And I think that's what we're certainly getting way better at. Are we perfect yet? Nobody's perfect, but that's what we strive to do.
Sure, absolutely. And I think that that's a really good transition into culture again, because I know that we're talking about it a little bit, and I think that you guys were talking about it in two different lights, on the ops side and on the dev side. And I think that it would be good for people to understand from a development side how you guys use culture as an asset, because I think that oftentimes people feel like they need to have a culture, but they don't exactly know how to use it properly. So how are you guys able to use your culture as an asset when you're actually in the trenches trying to convince these people to come aboard and become part of the family?
Oh, that's great. I mean, it's hard to convey that through a phone call conversation or a webinar.
It's the discovery day.
It's the right. I think it's telling them about it. It's showing them what our franchise, we call it our mission statement, but it's really like kind of it's who we are as a company, about our servant leadership. And we start off the webinar by showing them that, and how it gets conveyed down, and how they're the most important person. But you're right, it's Discovery Day, it's Meet the Team Day, what we call it. It's the moment they walk through the door, they see the entire Tamarack office in the lobby welcoming them and greeting them, and we point to that mission statement on the wall, and Steve White sets it up and says, look, the moment you sign your contract, you can walk back through that door at any time, and we will stop what we're doing and help you or assist you or whatever you need, and then that carries out to the field and what Bud's support team does in the field. So
yeah, and I was going to ask, Bud, I think that that's a really good transition, Tim, I think is, how you guys actually are able to ingrain your culture, not only here at the corporate office, because that's obviously important, but also to the franchisees and the employees of the franchisees, too.
Well, I think one of the things that's really helped us the most right now is that millennials are the largest workforce in the country, and millennials are the prime people that we're looking for. And we've been able to point that the franchises in our system that have a strong culture and can communicate that will attract millennials, and they'll be willing to come in and be part of a business. I'm a big proponent. I am one of those people that thinks that the millennials are going to be perhaps one of the greatest workforces we've ever had. And
I hope so.
but they want culture. They want to see that they're part of something that is going to have a family-style environment, that is going to be able to help people, make a difference in their community, give them a pathway so they can see what advancement might look like, and also create some opportunity for them to have some flexibility in what they do. And we have been able to show that when we have trained our owners and they've embraced that, we're seeing longevity in their employees.
Sure.
And that's right now one of our best tools.
Yeah, and I think that, as somebody who talks about millennials and franchising a lot, I will tell you that one thing that I have found in a lot of the millennial founders of franchisors that I've spoken with is that authenticity is king, and I think that it's really important that when you are establishing a culture, that authenticity is the first thing you think of, that you're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. You're doing it because you actually believe that you're doing it, So I think that that's important, and I think that you guys are certainly doing so. So that's awesome to hear. And I think in closing, gentlemen, I do want to be respectful of your time. Lastly, I know that there are a lot of things, if you guys went back and kind of thought, what would I like to do differently when I came into PuroClean? Looking back, is there anything that you a mistake that you would have preferred not to do, and maybe something that people can learn from and not do themselves?
Well, for me, I was going from being a business owner and a consultant, and I found that there were times when there were conflicts between franchises or territorial disputes or those kind of things. I was wanting to just get on it, solve it, make it go away, Steve White was really instrumental at getting me to say, sometimes you need to let the stew cook for a little bit before you, and to take things a little bit slower. And the other thing was to realize that what you do for one,
it's not the same thing every time.
Yeah, there's no secrets in franchising. So the decision that I make with one particular franchise is going to have ripple effects. And it took me 2 or 3 times to learn that lesson and be able to step back and say, okay, the decision that I'm making with this particular owner is I'm dropping the pebble in the pond. Am I going to be okay with where these ripples go? So that was a big learning curve for me when I first got here.
Absolutely. Tim?
It's funny. I think there was so much to be done change-wise that, we had this saying in franchise development: we're trying to fix this plane while we're flying it.
Yeah, we've heard that one a lot too.
You can't stop selling to fix your sales process and everything else that comes with it. So, with that said, I think one of my personal core values is velocity, which sometimes gets me into trouble. Going too quickly, acting too fast, just to get things going and get this plane fixed. I think, learning to throttle down a little bit, taking my time, making decisions. There was a few things that we've had to undo. They weren't damaging decisions, but a few things that we've had to undo and redo over that course. So certainly that's where I can say, yeah, I think, just throttling down a little bit and analyzing the situation, because there's always the need to get out there quickly, get the biggest and best thing out there quickly, so it would impact sales. And I think my lesson learned here would certainly be to throttle down, slow down, and it probably would have steered me to the decisions where we're going to wind up soon. So.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Folks, if you guys would like to see more videos on Franchisors.com, many are available. Just feel free to scroll through the website. And if you have any questions for Tim and Bud offline, feel free to email me at Zach, that's Z-A-C-K, at modernbusiness.com. That is Zach, Z-A-C-K, at modernbusiness.com. Thanks, folks, and have a good day.